Fairy Tale Unit by Brittany Walls, Brittany Marty, and Lori Stone. The goal of this unit is to apply elements of a fairy tale into a fairy tale of their own creation. In doing so, they're going to study a classic fairy tale to learn the elements of a typical fairy tale, and then they're going to modify that classic fairy tale and make it their own. They're going to tell a story of their fairy tale through iMovie. First, we need to understand the learners. The students are fourth graders, which means they're between the ages of 9 and 10 years old. It is a very diverse classroom with variation of cultures. There's a variety of first languages, which includes English, Spanish, Mandarin, Chinese, Japanese, and several Indian language and dialects. The economic diversity in our classroom includes students on free and reduced lunch, average income household students, and students who belong in quote-unquote upper class. The academics based on MAP and F&P data include students that are above grade level, which is 25% of the students. 40% of the students fall below grade level, and 35% of our students fall on grade level. Couple of the major learning styles in the classroom are visual and kinesthetic learners. We have chosen 3 specific Common Core standards: RL 4.3, RL 4.9, and W 4.3. In these standards, it focuses on students being able to describe a story in depth using elements such as characters, settings, events that draw on specific details in the text. The other Common Core standards are asking you or the students to compare and contrast traditional literature, which fairy tales would fall in that category. The last but not least Common Core standard, it focuses on writing when the students are going to create their own narratives, and that is when they create their own fairy tales based on the original. The 3 objectives that the students will be able to do are as follows. Students will be able to analyze the elements of a fairy tale and show their understanding on a graphic organizer by using 100% accuracy when referring to the story. Number 2, students will be able to compare and contrast different fairy tale perspectives by using 3 100% accurate details from the text on each section of their Venn diagram. Last but not least, students will be able to create and present using iMovie a fractured fairy tale that is written from the antagonist's perspective, changing a minimum of 5 details from the original story. This unit focuses on Gagne's conditions of learning approach. It creates a systematic design to address students' needs and individualize instructional events. It defines characteristics, controlled external and sequential instructional events, and 8 conditions for learning are determined by the developmental stage of the learner and the subject matter. There are 5 different levels of learning: verbal information, intellectual skills, cognitive strategies, motor skills, and attitudes. Next, I'm going to talk about the application of Gagne's conditions of learning incorporated in our unit. Number 1, gaining attention, reception. Students will have an opportunity to list fairy tales that interest them, some that they might know from their past. The teacher will read Cinderella to the class. Number 2, informing learners, expectancy. Teacher will pose the question, what is a fairy tale? What makes a fairy tale? What types of elements are in a fairy tale? Simulating recall of prior learning, retrieval. Teacher will review fairy tales and fairy tale elements students might be familiar with and list them together as a class. Number 4, presenting the stimulus, selective perception. Teacher will present handouts to the students on the elements of a fairy tale that they should focus on. Number 5, providing learning guidance, semantic encoding. Model brainstorming for anchor chart, model storyboard steps, provide examples for compare and contrast of fairy tales. Number 6, eliciting performance, responding. Ask students to create their own fractured fairy tale using the storyboard and create their own iMovie presentations of their creation. Number 7, providing feedback, reinforcement. Check that their storyboard content is correct or incorrect. Peer editing and teacher conferencing of the fractured fairy tale drafts will be incorporated in this unit. Number 8, assessing performance, retrieval. Provide feedback and remediation through reteaching with the teacher or peer mentor. Number 9, enhancing retention and transfer, generalization. Completed iMovie incorporating required elements of a fairy tale. Secondary teaching and learning strategies that are incorporated in our unit. Janassen's theory. Learners can create their own hypermedia knowledge basis that reflects their own understanding of ideas. Students become designers rather than interpreters and encoders. How it's applied. Online graphic organizers and storyboard in Google Classroom are used. Online drafting and editing via Google Classroom. Creating a final summative fractured fairy tale using iMovie. Next, I will be talking about the technologies that are used in our unit. The first one includes Boards. Boards is an online storyboard application where students can import images or create drawings and manipulate that in order to create a sequence of events. Students will be using Boards in order to create their own fractured fairy tale. The next technology that we're going to talk about is iMovie. Students will use iMovie in order to put together a cohesive final project for their fractured fairy tale. With this technology, they will get the ability to add in pictures, clips, sound, music, and speaking. This will bring their fractured fairy tale to life for them. Next, I'm going to go over the day-to-day activities that are included in our unit. On day 1, teacher and students are going to read the original version of Cinderella. During this read aloud, they're going to discuss elements of a fairy tale, what they notice is part of a fairy tale, what elements they see make up a fairy tale. Reception. They're going to create a class anchor chart that includes the discussed elements of a fairy tale. Selective perception. The teacher is going to allow students to explore a list of fairy tales and allows them to choose one that interests them. Retrieval. The teacher can provide websites, book titles, QR codes of videos that introduce fairy tale books to them. They're going to read the book and record the story elements, which include plot, characters, setting, problem solution, and point of view or perspective. This is going to be due by day 4. On day 2, the class is going to reread Cinderella, and as a class, discuss and record story elements on the graphic organizers students will be using independently. Expectancy. That way, students know what's expected of them when they complete their own fairy tale. Students will be divided into groups and given an original fairy tale. They will be invited to read their fairy tale and fill out this same graphic organizer shared with them through Google Classroom during their independent reading time. This way, students can practice identifying the story elements that are incorporated within a fairy tale. Responding. On day 3, the teacher's going to read, "Seriously, Cinderella is so annoying," as told by the evil stepmother. The teacher's going to tell students to focus on the details that make the story seem different. During this read aloud, the teacher is going to model thinking about how the perspective has changed, semantic encoding. "Seriously, Cinderella is so annoying," as told by the stepmother, is a fractured fairy tale that allows students to really see the differences between the original and the fractured fairy tale. Teacher is going to challenge the students' thinking as to how this has changed the story and their perception of Cinderella. They're going to record their thinking on Post-its during the lesson. As a class, they're going to compare and contrast the different points of view and perspectives, as well as the elements of the fairy tale using Google Classroom Document. Elicit performance. Students will do the same thing for their own fractured fairy tale. Students will get their specific story's graphic organizer, example in the hyperlink, via Google Classroom. On day 4, students are going to create their own fractured fairy tale. Enhance retention. Read an original fairy tale using Red Riding Hood retrieval. During this read aloud, model thinking about point of view and perspective. The students are going to record their thoughts and share elements and details with each other, responding. The teacher will model brainstorming how events can change if written by the antagonist, semantic encoding. Students will now use the fairy tale from day 1 and should brainstorm how their fairy tale could change if written by the antagonist. And this brainstorm is going to happen in their author's journal folder on Google Docs. Enhance retention. On day 5, the teacher will model how to fill out the story map, their writing graphic organizer they're going to use, and how to change events that are appropriate to the antagonist of example fairy tale, semantic encoding. Next, during independent work time, students will fill out their own story map and plan for their fractured fairy tale. On days 6 through 8, the teacher will model how to use the storyboard plan online using boards to start their first draft of their fractured fairy tale, semantic encoding. Students will have time to start their work and work on their first draft of their story. The teacher will then model how to use an input dialogue to the first draft of writing. Students will have time adding in dialogue to their first draft, semantic encoding. Next will come peer editing and teacher conferences, reinforcement. Then, when done, students can start to brainstorm how to turn their fractured fairy tale into an iMovie, generalization. Lastly, on days 8 through 10, students will have time to work on their presentation of their written fractured fairy tales on iMovie. Students will have to depict the changes they made to the original fairy tale through their writing and movie, generalization. Some mixed ability differentiation. Speak Up, it's a screen reader. Students with low comprehension level and a need for visual assistance can use this. And next is Dragon Speech Recognition Software. It's a speech-to-text, and students with occupational movement needs can use this. Here are some examples of handouts that are going to be used throughout the unit. On the left is elements of a fairy tale where students can focus on the parts of the story. And on the right is my fractured fairy tale planning page. They can also use this when planning their fractured fairy tale writing. This is what a student artifact might look like throughout the unit when identifying the different elements of the fairy tale. It's a graphic organizer featuring Little Red Riding Hood compared as a traditional fairy tale to a fractured fairy tale from the antagonist point of view. All of these things will be focused online digital content. Students will be able to access these handouts and graphic organizers online. There's also the storyboard application and sources to find fairy tales online. Conceptual categorization. Modification. It allows for significant functional change in the classroom by task redesign. Boards allows students to import images, create drawings, add sounds and actions to the frame. Allows the students an opportunity to create a storyboard with online editing and peer collaboration. iMovie enables the students to combine audio, video, and text notes to create a presentation and allows the teacher to use the resource of the internet to model and teach the unit on fairy tales. Summative evaluation. Formative ways are class discussion, post-it notes, online graphic organizer and storyboard, peer editing, and teacher conferencing. Summative includes fractured fairy tale, student created on iMovie, and an opinion survey. Here is our list of references used for the unit. Hope you enjoyed our fairy tale unit.